Anvesh and Miskin, I guess you are already clear with the concepts what we discussed on the other day related to the fundamentals of VB.NET. So today we will try to start with, as I said, ASP.NET, where ASP.NET stands for Active Server Pages for .NET. Okay, so the current version of ASP.NET is 5.0 and we will be discussing ASP.NET 4.5 and finally we will be upgrading ourselves for 5.0. The reason for that is ASP.NET 5.0 has been totally redesigned from the scratch, including its architecture. Everything has been redesigned. So architectural level changes has happened. The folder level structure has been changed in ASP.NET 5.0. Okay. As a result, when we try to understand completely ASP.NET 5.0, which is not currently used by the industry, it will be difficult for us to survive. So what we do is we'll try to go with ASP.NET 4.5 with all the features, and then finally what are the changes that have happened, we'll try to discuss them. One second. One second. Okay, that's the one that we have to understand. So, but before we go with ASP.NET, let's try to understand the internet technology a bit. So, when we try to understand the traditional web application development, we will have a client which we can consider as a browser. We will have a web server which will try to maintain all your web applications, and it will be the software which will try to accept your request and responses will be given from the server. So all the web applications will be maintained. So what happens is whenever a client sends a request, the request will be given from the client to the server will be provided as a HTTP request, and whenever the requested content is available at the server, once the processing is done, then the response is going to be provided as HTTP response. So here, whenever you're going to send a request, the server is going to be a software which accepts your request in the format of HTTP. And once the server completes its processing, you're going to get a response as HTTP response. So the traditional web applications at the older days, whenever you have a requirement to interact with any external resources, okay, okay, this is not about the current generation. Current generation, even the client-side technology can interact with the external resources. We are just trying to understand the things what was there before ASP.NET. So if there is a requirement for interacting with any external resources such as a flat file, when I say a flat file, it can be a text file, XML document, or a comma separated value file, any particular file which can maintain the data in some file representation. Everything comes under a flat file, or it may be some kind of database also. and it may be some external resources like a network. So whenever there is a requirement such that a client is sending a request for interacting with the external resources, then what happens is the server using the client-side technologies long back, it was not in a position to interact and it cannot provide the response back. This was the problem that what we had been facing earlier. This is not going to happen. Okay, so let's try to have a small observation on this thing. Okay, whenever a client sends a request to the web server, then the request will be given as a HTTP request to the server. And once the server has completed its processing, then the response will be provided as HTTP response to the client. But what is the limitation we have is in a traditional web application development using client-side technology, the applications can't interact with the external resources such as flat files, database, or any external networks. That's the problem what we have. Since we have limitations that is there, we got a requirement. And what is the requirement is a technology or a specification which can interact with any external resources and to provide the response to the client in an efficient way. So that's what the requirement that we just have it. So a technology or a specification which can interact with any external resources and to provide the response to the client in an efficient way. For that, we got a solution and that solution is called as server-side technology. So when we say something like a server-side technology, we have various server-side technologies that have been introduced. So we have a server-side technology like CGI. We have something like servlets, ASP, JSP, PSP, PHP, Cold Fusion, Ruby on Rails, our ASP.NET, ASP.NET MVC, the list goes on. So you have various server-side technologies that are available for achieving the same task. So whatever the technologies I listed out here, any one among this is sufficient to achieve this particular requirement. So I can go for JSP or I can go for servlets, I can go for ASP.NET or PHP and we can able to do this. But when we say that there is a requirement uh, that we are going to opt for ASP.NET, then there should be some kind of strong reasons that should be there for selecting ASP.NET. And in the industry, there is some kind of misconception that is going on that is ASP.NET is out, and in future all the applications will be developed in ASP.NET MVC. So if you wanted to get started with MVC, since we need to know web technology, so we are going to learn ASP.NET. Later we'll upgrade to ASP.NET MVC. So the fact is, having ASP.NET MVC knowledge is good, but it is not that ASP.NET is going to be outdated and it will be removed and all. The fact is, the latest version is, we call it as one ASP.NET, which includes both the concepts of MVC as well as ASP.NET there. Okay, so ASP.NET will not be outdated. It will be still there in the industry for the entire thing. Still people are using the Microsoft technology for web application development. But one thing is, since we have another alternate solution is also available, what happens is some percentage of people who used to use completely ASP.NET, they may go for ASP.NET MVC also because of some advantages what they have. Okay, and it doesn't mean that ASP.NET is having some particular problems, because I just heard some particular people saying that ASP.NET is having some drawbacks. Because of that we are moving for ASP.NET MVC. The fact is, we don't have any kind of limitations as such in ASP.NET. ASP.NET is very very powerful, and the design goal of ASP.NET is totally different from the design goal of ASP.NET MVC. Okay, so when we are opting for ASP.NET, what is the reason for that? To understand that, let us try to discuss about the features what are supported by ASP.NET, so that if anyone says why we are opting for ASP.NET, we can say because of these reasons we are going for this. I already updated you saying that ASP.NET stands for Active Server Pages for .NET. Okay, so when we say ASP.NET, we can just consider it as it is a specification which is used to develop web applications and services. So whenever we wanted to develop a web application or a service, we can opt for ASP.NET. Remember this, it is going to be just a specification. Since ASP.NET is a specification, it has to be implemented with the support of some language that targets the .NET technology, such as C#.NET, or you can simply say C#, VB.NET. Any language you can just use and you can implement ASP.NET. Some people misunderstand that if I develop ASP.NET application with C#, we will have a good performance when compared with ASP.NET with VB.NET. These kind of changes will not be there whether you develop a ASP.NET application using C#.NET or ASP.NET application with VB.NET. You will never find any kind of differences with respect to performance, and hardly you will find any change in this, because the reason is, whether you go for C# or whether you go for VB.NET, the assemblies which we are going to use will always remain the same. The class definitions what you are going to use is going to be same. Only the difference is the scripting is going to change according to the language. And once the script is compiled, then again you're going to get some intermediate code which is going to be common for both C# and VB.NET. So at any point of time we can never, like sometimes what happens is, as most of the organizations uses ASP.NET with C Sharp and not with VB.NET. So what happens when we do ask a question, why are you going for ASP.NET with C Sharp? Means we people do say that because of the performances we go for ASP.NET with C Sharp, but there is no differences. And it's not that every company will be moving with ASP.NET with C Sharp. There are some big companies where still they will work with VB.NET itself. So, for example, there's a company called as Franklin Templeton. They are still in VB.NET only. Deloitte, half of the applications they use a C Sharp, half of the applications they are working with VB.NET. Okay, so it's not that it's totally been gone and all. Anything is fine. But since most of the people uses it, they go in that way. Now, coming to the features of ASP.NET, let's try to categorize the features based on the versions of ASP.NET so that we can understand in which version what changes has been happened. So when we try to understand ASP.NET 1.x, at the time, the problem what we were having is we had a classic ASP where we used to use some languages like HTML, VB script, JavaScript, etc. for developing a application. So we wanted to have some kind of technology where these things can be removed. They introduced something called as single language implementation support. You can choose any language you wanted to have and you can develop the application. If you are comfortable with C Sharp, you use ASP.NET with C Sharp. If you like VB.NET, develop with ASP.NET with VB.NET. Choose any language you wanted to use and implement the specification. But the thing is, when we got ASP.NET, then already ASP. Classic ASP projects are started in many organizations. In some organizations, 40% of the projects are already completed. And since ASP.NET was introduced, people wanted to move from classic ASP to ASP.NET. But the problem is ASP.NET is totally redesigned from the scratch when compared with classic ASP. So there is no possibility that we can migrate a classic ASP project to a ASP.NET project. And people were worried that if already 40% of the project is completed in classic ASP, now when ASP.NET is going to come, as we cannot migrate, what happens to this thing? Should I restart from the beginning? And again, we have to invest time and resources for this development. So Microsoft given a solution in ASP.NET 1.x that is called a side-by-side execution. So what is side-by-side execution is if I have a project which is developed in classic ASP where I completed up to 40%, I can stop there itself. From the next form onwards, I can continue with ASP.NET. Means within a single project, I can have some web forms as ASP pages and ASP.NET pages. And we got some kind of server-side controls are introduced to provide the user interface. So whenever you wanted to provide the user interface, we got some kind of server-side controls are introduced. So you don't have to have a background on HTML for achieving this particular thing. So I don't need to know an HTML. And the major problem with HTML we used to have those days is browsers are not capable enough to understand every tag present in HTML. It means that HTML language was to be treated as a browser dependent language. Some browsers understand some tags, some browsers may not understand the similar. So these kind of problems will not be there when we use this particular controls, as they have a capability to identify the client's browser and they can render the HTML tags accordingly. And validation controls are introduced to perform the client-side validations. So whenever you wanted to do some kind of validations, whether user has provided a value for a particular control or not, the given value of one control is equal to the other control or not, any kind of validation if you wanted to do it, then you don't have to write any kind of JavaScript code. We have been provided with some validation controls which we can use it. And along with this thing, we got something like ADO.NET, which stands for ActiveX Data Objects for .NET for interacting with the. So we have ADO.NET for interacting with the database. Other than this, they have a number of other features they have introduced, such as tracing is introduced to trace the flow of the application. Okay, so earlier in classic ASP, like if I wanted to understand whether my code is working properly or not, what I used to do was in between every business logic code, we used to write some response.write statement saying that connection established, statement executed successfully. This kind of statements we used to include. And once the complete project is developed or the page has been completed, whatever the response.write statements or whatever the statements we used to write there using some directives, we used to either comment them or remove that particular statements. When we remove that particular statements, again when I try to do some testing with some other values, if it raises any error, again I have to fill in those, which was quite complex to trace what is happening. Sometimes it so happens like we will be using some concepts where the value what is there in one page, you wanted to use it in another page. In that case, sometimes we observe that the values will be available in one and it may not be available in other when we do the calculations. To understand whether the value is getting passed or not, it's not that easy in previous. But ASP.NET provided a concept called as tracing where you can trace the complete flow of your application. And one of the advantage we have is globalization and localization has been introduced to develop multi-language application. Say for example, when you try to understand this particular requirements, okay, when you try to understand most of the web applications, whatever it has been developed, those applications will be using a language called as English. And there are a number of countries where people they don't use English. So if my application is only in English, my scalability of the application is limited to that area. So if we can able to provide an application with multiple languages, for example, in Arabic or French or German or Japanese, Chinese, then the scalability of my application increases like anything. So globalization and localization helps in achieving that particular task. And they introduce some kind of concepts like server-side caching has been introduced. They introduce some various server-side caching like page output caching, page fragmentation caching, and we got something called as data cache. So these are the server-side cachings which are being introduced in ASP.NET 1.x. Then along with this, we got a concept called as state management. So I cannot say it as introduced because it is available in the prior version also. I can say state management has been enhanced, where you have some concepts like say page level management, session level management, and application level management. As we said that the protocol which is used in internet is going to be an HTTP protocol, um, which is going to be a connection oriented and a stateless protocol, which means that when you use an HTTP protocol and send a request to the server accepts that particular request till it provides the response. Connectivity will be maintained. So we always call it as connection oriented. But once the response is given to the client, that is your browser, the server will not remember who is that particular client. It will not maintain the state of the user who has sent the request. So we call that as a stateless. Since your server will never recognize once the response is given, I need to use some kind of alternate methodologies to make my browser to tell who it is and to make a server to understand from where the request is coming from. For that, we take the support of state management concept. And we got some kind of new concept called as security has been introduced. In the previous versions, the security is completely manual, so you have to provide the security through custom level coding. But here we got some kind of features called as forms authentication, Windows authentication, and we got something like passport authentication. So these are the various security features that are supported. Okay, security, we got this features. And along with these concepts, okay, along with this, we got a concept called as web services has been introduced to provide the solutions for service oriented architecture. Mobile.net has been introduced to develop device independent applications. And web setup project is introduced to deploy the web application. So like any other desktop application in ASP.NET 1.x, what we can do is we can always deploy the application by creating a setup project to the server. So initially when ASP.NET was introduced in 2002, these are the features which was there for us. And when we try to observe the classic ASP and ASP.NET, most of the time I'm using a concept saying that introduced. When I say introduced, these features are not available in the classic ASP. As a result, most of the people were quite happy for this particular product, and it has got a very good response from the organizations also. But some feedback by the developers has been given on this thing. So what are the things that has been taken as a feedback is I said it's going to use a single language implementation. When we just try to understand the history of .NET, I have two languages which are very powerful coming from the .NET family. One is a C# language, the other one is a VB.NET language. These are the two languages which are coming from the .NET family. And when I try to understand C# is older than, or you can say elder than VB.NET. Once C# language was introduced, after over a period of 6 months, it VB.NET language got introduced. Okay, and when I just try to understand prior to .NET, most of the Microsoft developers are in VB stack. If I'm a desktop application developer, my applications uses VB, and if I'm a web application developer, we used to use VB script. And ASP.NET was introduced for us, where the language that is available for us is C#. VB.NET is not available, and it's a single language implementation. So people started with ASP.NET with C#, thinking that okay, C# is a new language, let's go with it. But the problems what they faced is the syntax of VB is quite different from the syntax of C#. People who are coming from C, C++, or even from Java to .NET, they were very comfortable with C# language. But the people who are from VB and VB script background, who are the majority of the developers who wanted to migrate to ASP.NET, they were a bit confused with the coding what C# was providing. As a result, they wanted to have ASP.NET development support with VB.NET, okay, so that they can use it. VB.NET was introduced after 6 months, but the technology was a single language implementation support. If there is a new project that was started, then I can directly use ASP.NET with VB.NET at the time. But in ASP.NET 1.0, you will not be able to change another language once you selected the C#. So people wanted to have multi-language support. When I say multi-language support, it is not that in one single page you use some part of the code as C# and some part of the code as VB.NET. If I wanted to, like I selected C#, so next page I wanted to go with VB.NET. If I don't like VB.NET, the next page I can again come back to C#. That was the support they were expecting. So the people who are interested in any of the language, they can continue with that. Okay, that was one particular feedback they have requested because most of the developers are VB. But the problem what happened is when VB.NET 1.x was introduced, that language was not standardized properly. Some of the object-oriented programming features are not effectively designed in VB.NET because we were expecting VB people to come for VB.NET, and they are not aware of the features properly. So they don't want to trouble those people, and hence that language was not standardized properly like C#. VB.NET got standardized only from 2.0. So most of the organizations, what they thought is, instead of going for an unstandardized language, let it get standardized. Till that time, we will start working with C# itself. That is one major reason why most of the organizations these days are working with ASP.NET with C#. Because by the time the support was given, it is almost more than 3 to 4 years. And in all these 3 to 4 years, all the developers are started with ASP.NET with C#. So the resources in the organizations, the knowledge base, the knowledge kits which are present in the organizations, everything is in C#. So they wanted to have the people in C#. But since most of the organizations, the high level organizations, bigger level organizations like Franklin Templeton and all, they have been in this industry for so many years and their applications are already developed in VB and classic ASP. For those people who are totally onto the VB.NET or VB platform, they are still going to work on VB.NET only. They will cannot do it because most of the libraries, everything will be there on that language. So they wanted to continue with VB.NET. But we had a requirement of multi-language support. And another thing is validation controls are introduced. But one problem is validation controls need to be grouped together. In ASP.NET 1.0, we had a problem like when I use a validation control, like say I design a page where in the same page what I try to do was I say new users where I provide a username, password as well as confirm password and a register button. On the same page I wanted to have a existing users, username, password and login button. When I try to apply the validation controls for all these particular controls, when I'm trying to register myself by providing username, password and confirm password, and if I click on register, the validations present in the login will give me an error saying that you have not supplied the values for the username and password of login. I'm trying to register with the website now. I don't have any kind of credentials for logging. But what happens is it will try to raise an error. So people requested Microsoft saying that do something so that I can able to group the validation controls together. Because these are two different categories itself. Since I wanted to use validation controls, most of the developers played a trick long back in 2002, 2003. What is the trick is, instead of using the login and registration page on the same, what they did is they designed two different pages. One is a login page and the other one is a registration page. And they provided a link from a login page to the register page to the login. Okay, so that they will not get this validation problems. In my registration page, I have only the controls for registration and validations are applied to the control. And in my login page, I have controls for the login and the validations for the login. Since if I'm a new user, I go to the register page. If I'm a existing user, I go to the login page. That's the trick what most of the developers played at. Now, if I try to close my eyes and if I see any website login, I always understand only one. You will see only login page, but registration page will be different because people are habituated now to see the login pages like that thing. Okay. And one of the other requirement what people have asked is cross-page submission is requested. What does cross-page submission means? Like in ASP.NET 1.0 and all, when I design a page, the page will be designed using ASP.NET and the code will be written. When I try to submit the data will always be submitted to the same page. Okay, the data will always be submitted to the same page. The designing will be on that page and the processing will also be on the same page. But when I'm coming from a classic ASP background, I'm habituated to design the user interface in an HTML page. From an HTML page, I used to pass a request to a ASP page. There the processing will be done. Based on some kind of condition, again I will redirect to a success page and an error page, but that's not the thing. Since this is totally redesigned, they made everything to happen on the same page where people were got confused in it. So they wanted to have something like a cross-page submission. These are the only three feedbacks what people have requested in 2002 for Microsoft in the next coming version. But what Microsoft has did is they came out with 2.0 almost 3 years later. That is in 2005 they came out with this particular product and this has been introduced in 2002. So we requested Microsoft in 2002 saying that this is what my requirement, and in 2005 they given us the solutions almost 3 years later. So in 2.0 what happens is multi-language support has been introduced. Means now I can design a ASP.NET site with some pages with C Sharp, some pages is with VB.NET. If the code in C Sharp, I can use it in VB.NET, etc. And validation controls can be grouped together. Now we have a capability to group the validation controls. As a result, I can design the login and registration on the same page. But since people are habituated to see it in a different way, even though that is possible, we are not doing that particular thing. Cross-page submission is introduced. From ASP.NET 2.0 onwards, we can just submit the data present in one page to the other page. These are the three requests what people have asked, but no one used this particular features in 2005. Okay, because for 3 years I've been working with ASP.NET with C Sharp. Now I almost forgotten VB.NET itself as a developer. So people are very happy to continue with the same thing. Even though multi-language support was introduced, it was not that useful. Even though we can use validation controls on the same page, since the clients are habituated to see the pages in a different way, and if I now design a login and registration on the same page, the novice client, what they say is, you don't know how to design the page, login should be different, registration should be different. They try to start arguing with us. And these days, when people are happy to do everything in one single page, they are not interested in again going for a cross-page submission, designing in one page, coding in other page, etc. So even this has not been that useful. But the other features what are introduced in 2.0 still used widely in the industry. One is a feature called as skins and themes are introduced. We got a very powerful concept called as skins and themes. I don't know, like when Orkut was introduced, one of the famous features is themes. People are crazy about the themes of Orkut, even though it was not that great successful social networking site, but at least in India, and it was very, very successful and all. Okay, so skins and themes are introduced. Master pages are introduced. So we got a concept called as master pages. Earlier, what we used to do was most of the websites, if you see the header, footer, the menus, everything remains common. So people they used to prepare some kind of controls and they use that particular controls at the place where the header has to be placed or footers has to be placed and all in ASP.NET 1.x. If there is a change that has to be done, again it's a big problem for us. But from 2.0, a concept like master pages has been introduced, which provides you a template such that anytime I wanted to change the look and feel of my site, I can always do that thing. Within no time, we can able to do it. That's the reason why these days you can see some websites with multiple versions, classic or beta, etc. are available. Content is going to be same, but look and feel will be different. Okay, so we have been introduced with this thing. Profiles are introduced. This is one term which we will be almost uh, we hear every day if you have social networking freaks and all. So any person who is there in social networking seats, this is one term which we will always see every day from some person or the other. Some person says he has updated the profile picture. Some person says that your profile status is not updated yet. N number of times we use this particular term, but this is a concept which was been introduced from 2.0, a very, very powerful feature. When we discuss it practically, I will try to show how do we implement it. And they introduced a concept called as web parts also, where you can always personalize your total site. Say if I am trying to design an online newspaper, as a customer, I will be happy to see only the news what I read it and all. Newspaper provider, he will provide all information. He will provide the details about the politics. He will try to provide the details about entertainment. Page 3, he provide the details about the sports, business and everything. Say for example, if I always open a newspaper and watch only entertainment section and the sports section, then the remaining part is no use for me. But I don't want to go click on next, next, next on the page. So if the site is designed with the web parts, I can just include only the things what I wanted to view on that page. The remaining all the things I can just remove it. For example, long back there was to be a website called as igoogle.com. Okay, which is a Google website only, but the difference between Google and iGoogle is completely customizable site where you can just try to customize anything you wanted to have. Okay, and even though this feature is introduced in ASP.NET, this is widely used in SharePoint. So SharePoint 2003 and 2007, even in SharePoint 2010, web parts was the killer concept in SharePoint. So if you know that thing, almost you can easily survive there. But that's a feature of our ASP.NET only. Okay, so we got features like web parts have been introduced, and ADO.NET has been enhanced with many new features such as SQL data source, XML data source, object data source. A whole bunch of features has been introduced, and 54 new server-side controls are introduced, and globalization and localization has been enhanced to provide the support for browser language. Say for example, when we just try to use change the browser language, for example, so if you just try to observe it, when I try to open my Facebook, it's going to be displayed in Telugu language. Maybe I have selected the default language as a Telugu. Okay, so if we try to change our language from Telugu to some other language, okay, for example, I keep Tamil as a language, and if I try to say okay, and if I refresh the page, you're going to get that particular site in Tamil. Not only Indian languages, if I try to go with some other language, for example, let me change a language to Arabic. You have many Arabic, so I like Arabic Yemen, and so okay. So earlier, what was happening is when we just try to observe this particular thing, in one point text, we had a support of globalization and localization where we can specify that, okay, where we can just try to specify that we are going to use so and so language, so we have to display the information in that manner. Okay, that's what we used to show up there. Okay, so if the user is interested in displaying this particular site in English, I will try to display the site in English. And if the user is interested in some other language, we use it in the other language. That's what we try to do it here. Okay, always try to do it. But here now what happens is when you change the language of the browser, we have a capability to change the content of the site. That support has been introduced only from 2.0. Prior versions doesn't have those things. Security features has been enhanced using roles and membership. So when ASP.NET 1.x was there, what was happening is we got some concept like forms authentication where we used to maintain the details in the configuration file. Whereas now we can store the details in a SQL Server database directly using the forms authentication with the out-of-box features provided by ASP.NET itself. And when we try to understand this thing, server-side caching has been enhanced using we got something called a substitution caching was introduced in ASP.NET 2.0, which was not there in 1.x version. Okay, and when we just try to observe this thing, mobile.NET has been removed and mobile forms has been introduced. So mobile.NET was a technology was there where I design a page using mobile.NET. I can execute on a browser or a mobile phone. So later in 2.0 they removed mobile.NET technology, integrated that as a part of ASP.NET itself, and they called it as mobile forms here. So mobile forms, if I design it, if you send a request from a browser, it will provide the response in the format what browser can understand. To the page, if you send a request from a mobile phone, it will provide the response in the format what mobile phone can understand. Okay, that's what we just have it here. Okay, and once we have this particular concepts, these are all these particular things are widely used in our technology. So skills and themes, master pages, profiles, web parts, everything has been used. Security enhancements, almost whatever the features I just listed out there, everything was there. And website publishing support has been introduced to deploy the website using single click. You can just click on that thing, automatically your site is going to get deployed. There is no process and all. It's quite easy for us to deploy this particular thing. So these are the features which are being introduced in ASP.NET 2.0. If you just try to observe the number of features, it's almost like another new version itself. So the people who used to work with ASP.NET 1.x and when they just observed 2.0, they felt like altogether it's a new product itself because so many enhancements, so many features has been added in 2.0. And later Microsoft, what they did is instead of collecting the feedback, they started feedbacks are always accepted, but they started working on the features and they started releasing the products at the earliest possible. After this, we got 3.x version, which is introduced in 2008. So when 3.x was being developed, then Microsoft concentration was not on ASP.NET technology. They were concentrating more on the .NET framework and its enhancements. So we don't find much changes in ASP.NET 3.x as they felt that ASP.NET already have enough features that is required for the next generation application development also. So the concentration was mainly on the .NET framework. As a result, what happened is uh, we can use complete .NET 3.x framework features such as WCF, link, workflows, card space, etc. can be used from ASP.NET applications. And each and every framework itself is a individual product like. So it's such a powerful features has been there, so you can just use it. Automatically your product power will also increase. Implicit CSS styling or CSS support has been introduced to provide what you see, what you get effects. Okay, implicit CSS support has been introduced to provide what you see, what you get effect. So whatever the things that you're going to have it, you're going to have this thing. So you will automatically have this support. The advantage what happens is, like, once I place a control in my browser, the same look and feel, the same thing will be there in any other browser irrespective of the resolutions they are going to use it. That support has been added. So when you place it, automatically some style sheet code will be added for you. In the previous versions, it was not there. From 3.x version, whenever you're going to place a control, whenever you try to do something, automatically some kind of style sheets will be added for your code to make it what you see, what you get effects in your browser. ASP.NET Ajax has been added as a part of ASP.NET framework. Earlier, till ASP.NET 2.0, Ajax was a separate framework and ASP.NET is a separate one. But now ASP.NET Ajax has been added as a part of ASP.NET itself. So when you have ASP.NET, it indicates that you already have Ajax support. From 3.x, we have this particular thing. And along with this, new server-side controls has been introduced. New data-bound controls and database features enhancements has been performed. So very few things in 3.x, nothing much, but each and everything is an individual feature that is there. But from ASP.NET 4.x, which was released in 2010, okay, and 4.5 also, which was released in 2012, they have lots of features that have been added now. So when we try to understand 4.x features, okay, so when we just try to understand this particular thing, URL routing is introduced to provide friendly URLs and also to support search engine optimization. So whenever you wanted to have it, you got a new feature that has been added. Model binding has been introduced. Query extenders has been introduced to filter the data. Session level state management has been enhanced using session shrinking features. Server-side caching has been enhanced using output caching feature. Open authentications has been introduced to provide the security for the website using social networking or social network site credentials. So usually what happens is, the major problem many people faces is, if I'm a site owner, I want my site to be secure. So if I prepare a registration form, login form, and if I ask my people to log into the site to access my content, many people are not happy to that thing. So what we try to do is, now from 4.0 onwards, we have a support of open authentications where you can use a social networking sites such as Google or Facebook or Twitter or Microsoft accounts, and you can just use those particular credentials to log on to our site. So any particular person who has these credentials, I don't have to register separately for the site. I can use those logins and log into this thing. So these are the features which have been added for this particular things. And okay, and in 3.x, okay, along with this we have web API has been introduced as a substitute for WCF REST services, and we got something like ADO.NET entity object model is also used to interact with the database. And when we try to observe this thing, we got some concept called a signal R has been introduced. Okay, and SPA, it stands for single page application development, is also introduced. So these are the features which are available in our 4.x. Once again, a lot of features has been added in your ASP.NET. And remember this, in 3.5 mobile forms has been removed. So there is no more mobile forms in our thing, because Microsoft felt that how web technologies is growing, similarly mobile technology is also growing, so we should not combine both, so they separated this particular things. And the latest version what we have is ASP.NET 5, which is going to mainly target for the cross-platform environment, and we have a support for mobile development also. The Cordova support has been given, and one of the major thing that happened in 5.0 was the architectural level changes. So lots of changes has been happened, which we will be discussing once we get into the things. Once we complete all these things, we will try to get into this thing. Okay, this is a brief introduction on this, and our total course is nothing but understanding all these features. Okay, so with this, we'll try to stop for today, and tomorrow's session. Okay, so in tomorrow's session, we'll start understanding the architecture of ASP.NET. Okay, so with this, I try to stop itself. If you have any queries, you can just contact me. Okay, let me stop with the recording.